What does avoiding discomfort really mean?
I think avoiding discomfort means absolutely stalling your growth and any opportunity at a life that feels fulfilling, which is the name of this podcast. So I think that's why it's really relevant.
Mm.
And that's really the hidden cost of avoiding discomfort, which is what is so very easy to do in our lives nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely right. With everything that's just so easily attainable, and we're used to these like quick fixes. And I feel like we're sent the message that we should take the easy path and make life less and less challenging and less uncomfortable. But I love this reminder that discomfort often is actually the way towards doing things that are going to fulfill us more and add so much value and color to our lives.
Yeah. I think that there's truth in what you said in terms of, right, we're encouraged to take the easy way, and it's also a natural thing that our brain wants to like take the route of like least friction.
Mm.
And also, I'm not somebody to argue like I'm very much work smarter, not harder. Like I often say like I'm lazy as they come, not in the sense of like I'm gonna sit on the couch all day, but I will find like the efficient ways to do things. And I think there's totally a space for that. But the way I think of discomfort often is more about making emotionally based decisions, and he's like, oh, this feels uncomfortable, or this feels scary, or this feels whatever, and then just
Mm.
running in the opposite direction because you're taking that as information and as reasoning for why you should or shouldn't do that.
Mm.
Where often it's exactly in those discomforts that your growth opportunity lies, and it's kind of like what you should really run towards, even though it is uncomfortable. And the more you do those things that are a little scary and uncomfortable, the better you get at doing them, or vice versa. The more you avoid them, the more you kind of create this self-fulfilling prophecy that you can't really do them. You're just not cut out for that.
Yeah, I think that's such a key shift. And I'm so glad that you said that. I think the message in our minds often when that discomfort arises is like, I should run away from that and I should lean away from that because our body's trying to protect us, maybe. You share this beautiful idea that every time you avoid discomfort, you're reinforcing the belief that you can't handle it. Whereas, as you just shared, every time you lean into discomfort, it's disproving that belief that you can't, and it's strengthening the resilience and capability to face what feels uncomfortable and to lean into those fears we might be having.
Exactly. I always think the easiest way to think about this is the same way you might think about building muscle at the gym. You
Mm.
have to work with resistance. And, often at the gym, people say like the best rep is the rep that you feel like you can't do anymore, like the last rep that you're like
Mm.
barely holding on for dear life kind of thing. That is the rep that makes most of the progress. So it's that progressive overload principle that is going to feel uncomfortable. And it is also the best way to build muscle, right? And so if you think about it the same way with, I guess, psychological muscle, let's say you doing that thing that it feels like just a little bit too uncomfortable and really takes all of you to like do that thing. And it can be a small thing. It doesn't always have to be like a life-changing one-time thing, right? But you squeezing in that last rep, let's say, metaphorically speaking, that is what makes it grow and just increases your capacity to lift more weights. I'm putting that in quotation marks for anyone who's not watching this,
Yeah.
to lift more weights in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that analogy. It's just strengthening our muscle, strengthening our capability to face those challenges and face that discomfort. You
Absolutely.
also dive a lot into perfectionism. And I want to share this quote that I would love your further thoughts on. You're not a perfectionist. You're someone who uses perfectionism to feel safe. How is perfectionism often just maybe keeping us stuck where we are?
What a big question. Maybe say a few words about why I speak about perfectionism in that way first, which is just that I think perfectionism is kind of like this socially acceptable form of self-sabotage, because like it's like this, right, like I just have high expectations, I have high standards, I like am a detail-oriented person. It's
Mm.
often hidden in those things. And I always have to say I am not against high standards and quality work and excellence. That's not what this is about. This is about perfectionism that is more deeply rooted in a I cannot do something until it is perfect, meaning completely foolproof of any criticism, which can never be achieved. And thus, I don't really get there, or I don't even start because I don't think I can do it perfectly. Now,
Mm.
that is paralyzing. A pursuit of excellence is wonderful. 100%, we can talk about that in a second, but that's different from perfectionism. And so, the way I like to phrase perfectionism, or why I talk about it in this way, is just an understanding of like all you're trying to do here is trying to keep yourself safe, right? That's that quote that you just read to us. Like, if I am under the belief that if I get an A plus or I get the perfect, I don't know, business sales page or the perfect podcast episode or the perfect social media post, whatever it is, then I'm definitely not going to get any bad comments. It definitely can't fail. You know, nobody's going to say anything mean about it. All those things. All that's doing is protecting me, keeping me safe from any of that potential criticism, failure, all those things, right? So as long as I'm under the illusion that that exists and I'm searching for that, I either often stay stuck in an endless loop of like perfecting every tiny detail about, let's say, the post or whatever it is, or completely blocked by it because I have such high expectations and I don't have, you know, the time, the capacity, the creativity, whatever it is. Like I might look at what somebody else is doing and feel like that's the perfect, like that's, they do it so well. I'm never going to be able to do it that well. That's all an expression of this underlying narrative of like, it needs to be that way for me to be okay.
Yeah, there's so many things that you shared that I want to touch on. But before I do, I need to close my window because this is blinding me.
As beautiful as the natural light was.
I know it was a perfect balance when we started, and then we got to a point where I'm like, gosh, that's so much better. We got to a point where I'm like, this is directly in my eyes. So I apologize. I'll cut that out, or maybe I
So
won't. It's kind of funny. Yeah, 100%. I think I know I experienced that, right? And so it's really reassuring to hear you say that we often use it as almost a way that we're telling ourselves we can avoid that failure and like that judgment from others. And like, okay, if I come across in this perfect way, there's no way that there's room for any of that rejection and any of that uncomfortable feeling that would come up if, someone saw my flaws. But I think as you shared, what that's really doing is keeping us in this paralyzed state or maybe this chase to constantly make everything perfect and always maybe be focusing on the ways that we can like tweak that one little thing that's wrong to make sure that we are achieving that perfect standard. And so I'm glad that you touched on that balance too of excellence is great and trying to make something great, that's a positive thing. But maybe it's a bit of a spectrum, right? Where it's like there's excellence and there's striving to do something great and greatness, and then there's perfection, which might be the thing actually keeping us trapped.
and the reason I make that distinction, right, is like every time I post anything about perfectionism on the internet, it takes max like a couple hours before somebody's in the comment is like, oh, stop like telling people they should lower their standards, or like, what do you mean? I just do great work and whatever. So this like divide between like perfectionism being understood as a path to really great work or really great outcomes or anything like that is immediately there. And that distinction totally exists in my mind. And I came to realize across the more time sort of speaking about it, I was like, oh, that distinction isn't clear. And I think that the way to the difference is often also thinking about excellence. In excellence rarely exists in isolation. So what I mean by that is take, for example, let's say we're on a podcast right now and I want to create this perfect podcast, right? This like number one, whatever podcast. There's no way I'm going to do that by sitting in my room thinking about the perfect titles and the perfect, whatever outline of all the episodes I could do or the perfect cover photo, whatever it is. The only way I can make this better is by putting it out into the world and gathering the feedback from the people that it's supposed to serve. That's what's going to make it excellent. And it is the same for a lot of work. I obviously work mostly with, people who work for themselves, founders, independents, self-employed kind of thing. But even in the corporate world, if you are creating something for a client, you probably can't see everything that somebody else could see. So the moment you share it with a coworker or you send a first draft to someone or whatever it is, and you can gain that input, is how it can become excellent. It cannot become excellent by you kind of crafting on all the nitty gritty things and, kind of losing yourself in those isolated iterations.
I really, really like that idea that it's not about just like coming up with that perfect plan that we think is going to be perceived well, but it's actually taking action, creating the thing, doing the thing that we want to be perfect in. And through that action and through the feedback and learning in the action, that is actually how we can achieve maybe that greatness and excellence. It's not maybe just scrutinizing on the problem over and over, or crafting that perfect plan but never acting on it. And so I think that's really helpful that you shared, like, this is how you can navigate greatness while not getting trapped in that perfection. Because the sitting in the room, like you said, coming up with the perfect podcast episode, that might be dwelling on perfection, but the sitting down and recording and getting feedback and learning from that doing, that's the path to excellence and greatness. I
One
love
keeps
that.
you in motion, one keeps you, yeah, just stuck in your head and kind of feeling more paralyzed, but it does keep you safe from the judgment, right? Again, if you're sitting in your room and you're just thinking about the episode and crafting the perfect plan or whatever it is, then you're not maybe putting it out there, or you are putting it out there so late that you could have done other things in the meantime, but you don't get criticized or whatever it is. It's just like there's a cost to that. And with perfectionism, it's just so often confused with the high standards, which is laudable and great, and people should absolutely try and, strive for great work. But it's not the same.
I think this almost connects to the discomfort element too, right? Because that fear of judgment, or maybe that fear of failure, like, that is the thing that feels uncomfortable and the thing that we often want to avoid. But it's exactly like you said in the beginning, like, the way to actually combat that fear and reduce that fear is doing the thing that actually might subject you to judgment and subject you to, quote, failure, to build that muscle within us that makes us capable to face it. It makes us more resilient and less susceptible to those fears that creep in. Yeah. So full circle. I
Really
love that.
the Yeah, and really the message that somebody who's in the position of like, I tend to perfect things, the the experience that they need to have is, I will be okay even if it's not perfect. In essence, that is the experience they need to
Mm,
have, right? The same as like, this is uncomfortable, but I can do it, and that's the cycle you reinforce. Like, I almost thought I couldn't squat this weight, and then I did,
mm,
and then next time I feel more comfortable squatting more weight, right? And if you never recognize that you are not striving for excellence, but you are trying to make something perfect, then you don't give yourself room to learn that, which
mm.
often leads to you putting much, much, much more weight onto the things that you are producing and creating your work. So you'll get much more. It's Everything becomes a lot more personalized. So if this project doesn't go well, if this podcast doesn't go well, then I'm like, oh my god, I'm a failure. I'm terrible at everything I do. I can't do anything right. Like, it becomes about me versus like, this is an episode I created, and I can now see how people react to it, and then I can make the next one better.
Mm.
Um, it's perfectionism and also imposter syndrome. There's so many things that kind of connect to this whole mindset of, there is a right way, a best way, a perfect way to do something. That all of those things are real, real, real blockers to actual great work.
I couldn't agree more. Actually, one thing I've leaned into in my own personal life recently is leaning into being imperfect. And again, there's going to be those people who are like, oh, she's lowering her standards, right? It's not that. It's training myself to feel okay when things are imperfect and feel messy. Like, I actually just did a recent episode on this idea of embracing the messy in life, because taking imperfect action means you're taking action, but feeling stuck and not taking action until things feel perfect, again, that's the trap. And so, to me, what's helpful, because I very much have had perfectionist tendencies all my life, is really welcoming the imperfect and really welcoming the messy, to find that balance of, I can strive for greatness, but be okay if things are imperfect and don't go perfectly well and feel a little bit messy at times. This actually leads into another point that I wanted to touch on, because I think when we want to do things in life, that perfectionism, like we just shared, can get in the way. But you share this beautiful reframe that feeling ready isn't a feeling, it's a decision. What do you mean by that?
What I really mean by that is, no matter what you're trying to do, you're never actually going to feel ready. There's like, because feeling ready, as in like, oh, I now have this full body, yes, feeling, I suppose, is a really unreliable thing. It is just like motivation is unreliable. It's not something that I should build my strategy around, let's say, right? And so to wait for that, when the truth of the matter will always be, again, your brain will choose the easy way out. It doesn't love the unfamiliar. It doesn't love whatever next is around the corner. You're never going to be able to make something perfectly predictable for your brain that you've never done before, which is the whole
Mm,
epitome of being ready for something. It's probably something new. And it doesn't matter if this is starting a business or launching a podcast or starting a family or whatever it is, right? This is a range of things. These are usually things you haven't done before. You don't know exactly how they're going to go, which freaks your little pattern predicting machine, aka your brain, out. So it will always find something else to tell you as to why you are not ready. You will never break this cycle if your goal is to feel ready. What you can do is you can say, okay, I need a baseline of things, like just like I'm deciding, like once I reach this point or once this day comes or whatever it is, that's fine. But then you say, and that is the decision I make. And by that point, no matter what happens, I'm launching the thing.
Mm.
Or I'm deciding whether I want to have the family or not, whatever it is. Like that's obviously a much, much bigger question. I was like, kind of regret giving that example, but let's say, right, I could, yeah, let's say, stick with the podcast example because it's a bit more accessible. Like if I say I'm going to launch the podcast once I feel ready, I guarantee you, if you're this type of persona, right, this is also not everybody. There's people who would think of the podcast and launch it tomorrow. But
Mm.
we're talking about a certain persona right now. She will never, never, never reach that point unless she just says, okay, it's happening on the 1st of October or whenever that is, right? Like,
Mm.
or she says to someone, I'm going to do this, hold me accountable to it. She makes a decision that it's going to happen regardless.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. Like, it's that accountability piece that isn't dependent on the feeling and on that inspiration and motivation being there, but it's, I'm going to do this even when I don't feel like it. And what's proven time and time again in my life to be helpful is like once I start the thing, then I start to feel like it if it's something that's aligned, right? And so I think it's the starting that we often don't feel like, as you shared. We don't need to wait to feel ready. We can start, and then that feeling of flow and actually feeling more ready and inspired comes after we start. Quick little interruption here. If you feel like your environment's not serving you, if you find yourself stuck in the same old patterns and ways and wanting a change, wanting to break free, this message is for you. I am now working one-on-one with clients in my life coaching practice to help you step into a life that truly feels exciting, aligned, and fulfilling to you. So if you're interested in exploring this a little bit further, check out my website linked below, book a free session with me. I would love to learn more about your life and help you step into your full potential and live a life that you really love. All right, let's get back to the episode.
100%. It's the same with motivation, right? It's the same principle that a lot of us are stuck in. And unfortunately, I've kind of bought into this idea like that I have to feel like doing something. I have to feel like going to the gym. I have to feel motivated to do X, Y, and Z. When really, usually, it's exactly the opposite way around, where once I do the thing, the feeling follows. So once I am
Mm.
at the gym, I feel more motivated to be at the gym. Once I have launched the podcast, I get better ideas and I feel more ready to be a podcaster or whatever it is. It is exactly the opposite. So one of the most powerful things you can ever do in your life is to learn to uncouple your feelings from the decisions that you make. So to return to a balanced state of decision making and thinking that isn't determined by how you feel that day. Because feelings are literally a little like the weather, right? I could say like I only work on sunny days. That's the same as me saying I only work when I'm motivated or I only, launch things when I'm feeling ready. That's the same as me saying I only work when it's sunny outside.
Mm.
And then what if it happens to rain for 2 weeks straight? Like I can't be dependent on that.
Yeah.
That's not going to get me places.
It's going to be a pretty unprofitable couple weeks then for you.
Exactly.
Why does self sabotage show up often right before a big change? And how can we prevent this?
So the reason I think it really is kind of comes back down to what I said earlier about your prediction making machine. Um, your brain, the way it's naturally wired, it's not wired to lead to maximum fulfillment for you. It's wired to help you survive and, carry on the human race essentially. That's what it's wired to do. That's what it's really designed for. It is not a machine that's like, I'm going to scan for optimal pathways to your whatever life purpose goal or anything like that. And so anything that disrupts this, like, oh, I already know this. This is already familiar. We stay surviving this way, aka a big change, right? So saying, brain loves survival. Anything that is familiar and predictable and has led you to survive so far clearly works in this
Mm.
pattern predicting machine. Anything that is different, and this is where aka a big change, will lead to resistance against that. And the way self-sabotage then does that, right? It's not like your brain just goes like, hey, actually, I feel like I'd rather like survive and not do any of these new things. It's not that that's the message you get. The message you get is often a lot more driven through subconscious patterns, through subconscious thoughts, beliefs, whatever it is, where you will find a way to make it sound almost like very reasonable and logical that you're not about to do this thing. So this is where we then come up with excuses like, I just need, I don't know, I need to take one more course before that. I just need this
Mm,
amount of money before that. I just need X, Y, and Z. Again, not always self-sabotage. This is the thing. Like none of this is like, that's always when you say you need more time, it's self-sabotage. No. Sometimes maybe it's reasonable to take a little more time. But if you find yourself in the, oh, next year I'll do it, next year I'll do it, next year I'll do it, whatever kind of loop, then there's something deeper at play and you're trying to just avoid, or your brain is doing everything in its power to avoid this unfamiliar step, but it's always going to stay unfamiliar, which is why we come back to the point of like, it needs to be a decision you make. It's never going to feel like the great next step because it's unfamiliar.
yeah, it's almost like similar to that perfectionism. Like we think we're protecting ourselves because we're avoiding that uncertainty, maybe, but really we're just procrastinating the change that we know we either want to make or that we really should make. And so it's interesting. It's like that distinction of our brain's telling us one thing and thinks that it's serving us in one way. But it's like if we detach from those thoughts and that cycle of maybe self sabotage and maybe procrastination, whatever it is, and tune back to our inner knowing of like, it's time. This is a change I know I really want to make. Maybe that's helpful to detach from those thoughts and that procrastination and cycle from sabotaging the plan and continuing to push it off.
Yeah, and I think it helps to understand what your brain is for because otherwise you rely too much on what this machine is doing for you, or what it's trying, right? Like you take everything every thought as like a truth, you take every doubt as a truth, you take every,
Mm,
you need to understand that again, this system, this little machine in your forehead is not designed by default to lead you to the most optimal, fulfilling outcome. If
mm,
that outcome is uncertain, if that outcome is unfamiliar, it's never going to just naturally by default lead you there until you address and this is intentional, deliberately like shift your focuses, reprogram because survival requires very different things from
mm,
fulfillment. Survival requires you to be very aware of all the threats, all the potential risks, all the negatives that could happen, right? Like it is much more important for me to be aware of the fact that there might be a tiger waiting outside my cave than it is for me to like look outside and look at, I don't know, all the ways and all the locations I could find berries or whatever it is. I
mm,
obviously have to find berries eventually, but what's much more important to my survival might be, is there a tiger on the way? So that's naturally what I'm drawn to.
mm.
This is the negativity bias, right? Like risk aversion, all these things come into play. And if I don't understand that that is the principal function of this machine, and I still take everything that it tells me as the truth, then I don't have to wonder that I'm not like in my most fulfilled state because I'm just following a machine that's not designed to lead me there.
I am so glad you brought this up. It's something I rarely think about. And I think that most people don't think about this, that our brains aren't wired to give us that most fulfilling life and to help us step into our best potential. It's almost wired. This is crazy. Like our brains are almost wired to like keep us from reaching our full potential because it wants us to just feel safe. And like we talked about in the beginning, stepping into that fulfilling life and our full potential means feeling that discomfort. It means stepping towards that fear that feels scary, but we know that that's the path to get there. But our brains are doing everything to keep us from doing that. And so it's crazy. It's almost like, yes, our brain is keeping us safe and away from actual threats and danger. And obviously, we need that. Otherwise, we would just cross the street without looking and, oh no, there's a bus. But when it comes to going for these goals and maybe doing the things that we're meant to do in this life, the things that will truly light us up and fulfill us, it's not the brain that's going to get us there.
So it's so interesting because yes, and this is where we kind of have to differentiate between brain and I suppose consciousness or the mind, in the sense that like we do have agency, right? It's just that we need to stay away from the idea that we will naturally ever feel like it or the day will come where future, you know how often we dream of
Mm,
future me being like the more disciplined version of me. Like I think everybody can
mm-hmm,
relate where when you think like, oh, like by Monday, I'm going to do all these things. Or, I mean, we're not too far from the new year now where all of a sudden on January 1st, you think you're going to be a new person. Like these things don't happen. You're still the same thing with the same machine, the
mm,
same being with the same machine. So you need to let go of the idea that there's ever going to be a point where this will be easy for you because you're not operating a machine that is supposed to easily facilitate that. But
Mm.
you are still operating this, right? I think this is where we also don't need to give away our power in the sense of like, well, our brains just aren't designed like that. So whoops, guess that's not for me. It's like, no, it just means that you need to start working with your brain and start learning the actual purpose of this and how you can influence what it sees and how it feels about certain things, and also the window of tolerance it has for this perceived safety. That's then how you can create the change. But you can't do it by, you know, just like trying the same thing all over again and just imagining yourself to be a different person for who's going to feel motivated, who's going to feel ready, and who's going to do all these things at some magical point in the future, because you still have the same machine.
Mm. Okay, I'm glad you clarified that. So it's still taking agency and ultimately just not being victim to the brain that might be telling us one thing, but it sounds like befriending our brain. So, what are ways that you help people like get our brain on board, right? Befriend our brain and maybe do a bit of that reprogramming to shift to thoughts and empowering beliefs that can help us step into our true potential.
I really think that the key word here is almost discernment, because it becomes the effort becomes, let's say, my thoughts, which is what most people are maybe most consciously aware of, and learning to decide which thoughts I am on board with and which ones I want to pursue further and which ones I'm literally going to catalog as junk mail. So there's a lot of this in sort of therapy modalities where it's like your thoughts are like, right? They are like, I personally love, for example, an email inbox. Like you'll get so many things in your email inbox that do not require your dedicated attention, and still they're in your inbox. But that means you this is the thing about discernment, that I mean, your effort, your agency, your power, the thing that you want to train lies not in I only want to have positive thoughts, because that's not going to happen, because that's not the machine you have.
Mm.
But what can happen is you look at the thoughts that come in and you practice going like, okay, that one really deserves my, deliberation and attention. Okay, I'm going to really respond to this email. That one, I think I can like postpone for later. That one's not that interesting. And that one is
Mm.
just pure junk. And I can practice my discernment of those. So that's the level of the thoughts, right? Which I say that's probably what most people are most commonly aware of. And then also, how many people really stop to like listen to their thoughts actively, across the day, or journal them actively or anything like that? It's actually not that many. And also, they are often sort of, as the highest level of accessibility, then they come emotions that I need to learn to interpret and manage, that I might just feel a certain way, but I have zero language for emotions because
Mm.
I've never learned them. Most of us have about 4 to 8 words we regularly use for emotions. We say, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm mad, I'm angry, maybe, something else in between, but there's no nuance. So expanding that and really learning to work with your emotions and, shaping them, taking them for what they are and also shaping them, that gives you more agency, more power. Again, not because the emotion doesn't happen or you only have positive emotions. That wouldn't make you feel happy anyways, because if you're never sad, you're never happy. It's kind of like they have
Mm.
to come together. And then at the deeper layer, you have things that are not necessarily at the moment in your conscious mind. So subconscious beliefs, things that have been shaped by conditioning, things that, you're not even aware that there's a different way to think about this until you're exposed to it, until you bring it to like, oh, this is how I actually think about, the right way to make money, or this is how I think about the right way to be a person in the world. That's because my parents taught me this, my teachers taught me this, the society I grew up in taught me this. Those things can also all be reshaped. And also, that's usually a little deeper layer and requires a lot more bringing to awareness before you can reshape. But
Mm.
they all come together. So I often say, like, especially when we talk about things like self sabotage, I often talk about a cycle, right? Like, these things work together. Like, a certain belief and emotion will produce a certain thought. And then that thought will lead to you thinking you can take a certain action or not. And then it just reinforces the cycle. That's what we want to crack. And you can work at any levels of that cycle. Some people find it a lot more accessible to reshape their emotions, especially maybe they're more somatically inclined, meaning they like to work with their bodies and they can really use their bodies to influence their state of emotions. That might be the best in for them. Some people are really cognitively loaded, meaning they know a lot about their thoughts. That might be the best way in for them. So there's lots of like different ways, but that's essentially the pillars that will form your reality,
Mm.
whatever that reality is. And that's the agency, because just because the thoughts are happening doesn't mean you can't discern what you're going to do with them. Just because the emotions are happening doesn't mean you have control, doesn't mean you don't have control over how you respond. Just because you have certain beliefs doesn't mean you cannot make them conscious and reshape them.
I love that just simple clarity at the end, right? Like just because the thoughts and feelings are there doesn't mean that that has to determine the action that we take and how we choose to show up and live our lives. It's like I think about when I was young, and it's like any kid, right? Like we don't know how to separate those thoughts and feelings that arise and then we react at everything. We cry and all these things, but now as adults and having lived a lot more of our life and having this discernment that we've strengthened, we can understand that the thoughts and feelings aren't us, and we can have agency over how we live, maybe despite them. And so it sounds like from all that you just dove into, it's really just getting curious about the thoughts and feelings that arise, but then taking that agency and understanding like, is this an important email in the inbox, right? Is this one that I should focus on? Or is this one that I can skip over? It's a bit of junk mail. I like to think of two like clouds passing by in the sky. Like you can like let that cloud pass, like you're the sky, but the thought's just the cloud moving by. As you shared, there's so many ways to dive in, right? Like somatically, cognitively, ultimately, maybe to simplify it, it's just having that discernment, getting curious what's arising in thoughts or feelings, and taking agency over them to either replace it with a more empowering one and breaking that cycle that might be keeping you in that action loop that was being driven by those thoughts and feelings. And one last thing I actually would love to dive into. Why is that excuse of I'm too busy the most expensive excuse that we tell ourselves in this lifetime?
I love that. I think because if I'm too busy, it is the, let me rephrase. I'm too busy is the most expensive excuse we tell ourselves because most of the time we don't recognize that it is an excuse. And that's not to take away from anybody who actually has a busy life. I understand that. There are requirements and responsibilities, and they can make us busy. And also, those circumstances and the world at large will never stop keeping you busy if you let it. And the way that it's then often used, right, is like, I'm too busy to insert the blank, which the blank is do the thing I really want to do. I don't have time to sit down and work on my business. I don't have time. I'm too busy to, I don't know, go see my parents. It doesn't actually matter what's on the other side of that. It could be something business related, personal growth related. It could be community and connection related. And you will never not be busy. It's not going to happen. Like, that's not the way that our world is designed. Again, when we think about defaults, the default of the brain and the default of the society in this sense that we live in is to be busy. And so busy is not a flex, but so many people use it as a flex. Like, it's like literally you ask them, how are you doing? And they're like, oh, just really busy. And it's like, that's not a state of being, first of all. That's not a feeling. I have no idea how you're doing. And secondly, like, you say it as if that makes you important. You say it as if that gives you significance. But really, what it's telling me, unless you are busy with things that light you up, right, which is usually not the case in the people who say that's how I am, they say that with a huffing and puffing, like, I'm just too busy to do X, Y, and Z. But like, think about the compounding of all the years you've told yourself you're too busy. That's where it becomes so expensive. Like, you only think about the little like action that you might also want to take, but you never think about the inaction and how much that costs. And the busyness is the best excuse for inaction.
Wow. I just got chills when you shared that last part that we only think about all the action that we're taking and what's keeping us, quote, busy, but we don't think of the cost, which is actually the inaction that it's contributing to. And like you said, our society is making us more and more busy. We will always be busy. That's just how life goes because we can fill our schedules with all these things that might matter, might not matter that much, but is it at the cost of inaction on the thing that we really want to be doing? And that can compound over years and it becomes pretty expensive over time.
100%. I will add one more little nuance to that, which is if you don't take agency and you don't become intentional around it, you will always find a way to stay busy. Your boss will find a way to keep you busy. Society will kind of find a way to keep you busy. The newest standard that you have to live up to according to society will find a way to keep busy, right? Like, it's like you stepping into a role of responsibility and ownership and agency around how you are actually spending your time and what you will be busy with and where you will draw the line and where you will set boundaries and how you will prioritize and where you will be selective, that is the antidote. It's not that I'm arguing it's not okay to have things on your plate. It's not that I'm arguing it's not great to work hard on things that you care for. It is that most people who say I'm too busy are busy with things that do not lead them closer to the things that they actually want to be doing.
Yeah, it's like letting the busyness determine our lives instead of our values and our true desires and true intentions that actually aligns with us. Gosh, I love that. Charlotte, you're awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time today. Where can people find more of you?
The easiest way to find more of me is at or on Instagram at the Mind Friend. So literally, like if you think of having a friend for your mind, the Mind Friend, and then everything else from there just starts there.
Fantastic. That'll be linked below, but you're so wise. Thank you for sharing all these insights with us today.
Such a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I hope there was something in today's episode that resonated with you. If it did, don't forget to press follow or subscribe wherever you are listening to Fulfilled. This would mean the world to me and give you access to both episodes every single week when they come out. Also, take a moment and rate the show. It'd really mean the world to me and the success of the podcast. So I'll see you all again soon on your journeys to living this life fully.